From a back garden in Portsmouth to the hills of Helmand province, one British rifle has broken world records, won Olympic golds, and became the most feared sniper weapon in the history of Counter-Strike. The terror of pro CS lobbies, the assassin's tool in 100 action films, and the weapon behind the most astonishing long-range kill in recorded military history. Today, the story of how 3 target shooters, working out of a garden shed, built the most respected sniper rifle on Earth. The Accuracy International Arctic Warfare. But what most people don't know is that the British Army was being offered this rifle before the company that made it even had a proper factory. And while you might know it won the British Army contract, I bet you don't know every genius detail of how it actually got there, or just how close it came to dying in a liquidator's filing cabinet. By the early 1980s, Britain had a sniper problem, and it wasn't a small one. The rifle being handed to British snipers was the L42A1, a bolt-action design whose bones trace back to a Lee Enfield action from before the First World War. Let that sink in. The British Army sniper in 1982 was being sent onto a modern battlefield carrying a rifle that his great-grandfather could have checked out from stores at the Somme. It was a modified sporting rifle. It worked, mostly, but it had a wooden stock, and wood, as the Falklands War of 1982 was about to prove, does not care about your operational requirements. In the wet, cold conditions of the South Atlantic, the L42 A1's wooden stock would absorb water, swell, and shift, meaning the zero your sniper had spent hours dialing in was now fiction. The rifle that was accurate on Monday was lying to you by Wednesday. The Falklands dragged the problem into the open. The Ministry of Defence launched a formal competition. The prize, a contract for over 1,200 new rifles to finally retire the old Enfield design. Big names entered. Parker Hale with their M85, Heckler & Koch with the PSG-1, Sig Sauer with the SSG-2000, Remington, Winchester, proven manufacturers with facilities, workforces, and decades of military contracts. And then there was Accuracy International, a company that, at the time of entering the competition, was still assembling prototype rifles in a garden shed in Portsmouth. Nobody expected them to win. The story actually starts before Accuracy International existed, in a machine shop in Portsmouth, where 2 men named Dave Walls and Dave Kaig were making something nobody had asked them to make. Walls and Kaig were work colleagues and shooting enthusiasts. In their spare time, they decided to build working replicas of Colt 1860 Army and 1873 single-action Army revolvers. No commercial plan, no customer. Just 2 machinists who wanted to see if they could do it. They could. The replicas were good enough that Kaig and Walls formalized their partnership under the name C&W Products, Kaig and Walls, and started designing a target rifle from scratch. This brought them to a barbecue. At a 3-position rifle competition in the late 1970s, they met Malcolm Cooper. At the time, Cooper was one of the best shots in the UK. He owned a gun shop in Portsmouth. He competed internationally, and he would go on to win Olympic gold at Los Angeles in 1984, and again at Seoul in 1988, becoming the first man ever to win the 50-meter 3-position rifle event twice. After the match, they all went to a barbecue. Walls and Kaig told Cooper about the replica Colt pistols. He asked to see them. Walls lived less than a mile away, so they drove over. Cooper looked at the pistols, looked at the 2 machinists, and said, "You've got the potential to design your own rifle." "We already have been," they told him. Cooper saw the action. He asked them to make him one. He later shot a new 300-meter world record with it. In 1978, Walls, Kaig, Cooper, and Cooper's wife Sarah formally founded Accuracy International. All of them were competitive shooters. None of them ran a firearms company. The production base was Walls's garden shed. This is the origin of the best sniper rifle in the world. When Accuracy International entered the MOD competition in the early 1980s, they submitted something called the PM, the Precision Marksman, and it was unconventional. Where most military rifles of the era still used traditional wooden stocks, even with all of wood's known problems, the PM used a hollow polymer stock, molded from two halves and assembled around an aluminium bedding block. Here's why that matters. In a traditional rifle, the wood or fiberglass stock flexes slightly when it gets wet or hot. That flex transfers to the barrel. The barrel moves. Your zero drifts. The PM's aluminium bedding block meant the action was bolted to a chassis that simply didn't care about the weather. It held its zero through heat, cold, and damp in a way that wooden-stocked rifles physically couldn't. Then there was the approach to stock design. Most military rifle designers built a stock and then hoped soldiers of different sizes could make it work. The three founders of AI were of genuinely different body types. Cooper was around 5 feet 3 inches, Kaig a more average 5 feet 8 inches, and Walls the tallest at 6 feet 3 inches. They designed the stock adjustable from first principles, testing it on themselves, modifying it until a shooter of any build could get into the correct position the stock was designed to force. The thumbhole grip wasn't an aesthetic choice. It aligned the hand so the trigger could be pulled directly back in a straight line, not at an angle. The flat-bottomed stock force bench rest technique, as Walls later put it, a competent engineer with a reasonable amount of firearms knowledge could design a rifle. But to design one that forces someone into a good shooting position by the design of the stock is not that easy. Coming from a target shooting background, not a military one, AI had designed a rifle that was precision first, military second. Everyone else had done it the other way around. The MOD competition judges noticed. The PM rifle beat Parker Hale. It beat Heckler & Koch. It beat Sig Sauer and Remington. On the 11th of March 1985, Accuracy International received an order for 1,212 rifles, designated the L96A1 by the British Army, and unofficially nicknamed the Green Meanie. It was time to move out of the garden shed. AI now faced a problem that most small companies would call a very good problem to have, but which nearly killed them anyway. They had a contract for over 1,200 rifles and no factory to build them in. Initial production was subcontracted to a company in Dartford, under close supervision from Walls to ensure the rifles met his standards. The friction was constant. Outside manufacturers, used to their own tolerances and processes, were being supervised by a designer who wouldn't compromise. Arguments over bipods, arguments over finishes, arguments over tolerances that the contract manufacturer thought were excessive and Walls thought were the whole point. The rifles were eventually produced and delivered. The L96A1 entered service. But the experience convinced AI they needed to take manufacturing in-house. They bought 2 used CNC machines, set up a proper facility in Portsmouth, and started machining parts themselves. Meanwhile, Malcolm Cooper continued his shooting career, winning gold at Seoul in 1988, holding world records, running the business side. Kaig and Walls focused on development and military clients. Then, the Swedish army came calling. In 1993, Sweden ran a trial with a specific requirement that most rifle designers would have found daunting. The rifle had to function reliably at -40 degrees Celsius. Not perform well. Function at all. At -40, standard lubricants become viscous paste. Bolt mechanisms designed for temperate environments seize solid. Steel contracts. Polymer becomes brittle. The British L96A1 was a precise, reliable rifle in the conditions it was designed for. Sweden's conditions were something else entirely. AI went back to the drawing board and produced the AW, Arctic Warfare. The changes sound straightforward. Tougher polymer for the stock, a modified bolt that wouldn't ice up and lock solid, a 3-position safety, an enlarged trigger guard, stock hole, and magazine tabs so a soldier wearing Arctic mittens could actually operate the rifle without having to remove them. The cheek piece was made fully adjustable for clothing layers. Sweden adopted the Arctic warfare in 1991. The design was being refined through the early to mid-90s. Zero, as the Prickskyttegevär 90. The AW family had been born, and AI now had a name that would follow the rifle around the world. By the late 1990s, Accuracy International's rifles were in service with dozens of militaries. The AW family was growing, standard AW in 7.62mm, the AWP police variant, and the AWM, Arctic Warfare Magnum, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum. A cartridge AI had worked with ammunition manufacturer Lapua to develop specifically around the rifle's capabilities. And then, in 1999, a video game came out that you may have heard of. Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike introduced a bolt-action sniper rifle it called the AWP, Arctic Warfare Police. One-shot kill, monstrous price tag, iconic bark. An entire generation of PC gamers grew up knowing the name AWP as the most feared weapon in the game. Here's the problem. The rifle modelled in Counter-Strike isn't actually an AWP. It's an AWM, the Magnum variant, visually based on the German G22 version. The in-game model uses the AWM's front sight. The in-game caliber matches the AWM's .338 Lapua Magnum. Valve called it the AWP. The model is an AWM. An entire generation of people who could identify this rifle on sight grew up knowing it by the wrong name. Even on Liquipedia, the Counter-Strike esports reference, the listing reads, the AWP, Arctic Warfare Police. The game has been confusing this for over 25 years, and nobody at Valve appears particularly bothered by it. The effect on AI's profile was enormous, even if unintentional. Without paying a penny in marketing, the most precise military sniper rifle in the world became the most iconic weapon in the world's most played competitive shooter. Players who had never heard of Helmand province could strip describe the AWP's handling characteristics. On screen, the Arctic warfare showed up in Die Another Day in 2002, Bangkok Dangerous, Furious 7, Resident Evil Apocalypse, Spy Hunter, and on television in The Bill and numerous others. The rifle had escaped the range. In November 2009, a corporal of horse in the Blues and Royals named Craig Harrison was on convoy protection duty south of Musa Qala in Helmand province, Afghanistan. His convoy came under attack. 2 Taliban fighters had set up a PKM belt-fed machine gun and were putting sustained fire onto the lead vehicles. Harrison's position was well behind the column. The rangefinder came back with the distance, 2,475 meters. That's just over 1.5 miles. The L115A3, the British Army's designation for the AWM variant he was carrying, had a maximum effective range on human targets of around 1,500 meters. He was shooting 975 meters beyond the rifle's rated capability. Harrison later described the process to the BBC. It took him and his spotter around 9 shots to bracket the range, adjusting in on each ranging shot using a bracketing technique. When he finally had it, the first shot on target hit the machine gunner in the stomach. He went straight down. The second consecutive shot hit the second gunner in the side, down 2. A third shot disabled the machine gun itself. The bullets were in the air for close to 5 seconds each. Later that day, an Apache helicopter hovered over the firing position and used its laser rangefinder to measure the distance to the machine gun position. The distance was confirmed, 2,475 meters, the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history. Harrison later told an interviewer, "My rifle only shoots 1,500 meters. So, I had to lob in. I had to lob the bullet in." He described it as a fluke. He was, reportedly, stood up when he took the shot. The rifle was an L115A3 built by a company of 92 people in Portsmouth, England. It had been designed in a garden shed. In the early 2000s, Malcolm Cooper, who had retained 10% of Accuracy International shares after selling the company to outside investors, continued to work for the new owners. He died in June 2001 from cancer, aged 53. What followed was not a golden era. The new investors had no experience manufacturing rifles. Dave Walls, the man who had built the rifle from first principles, was sidelined, barely consulted on design decisions. The company that had beaten Remington, HK, and SIG in the MOD competition was now being run by people who didn't understand what they bought. By 2004, Accuracy International was in serious trouble. Attempts to find a buyer to recapitalize the company failed. On the 18th of February 2005, the company began liquidating assets. All employees were laid off. AI ceased operations. And then, in the space of 48 hours, it was saved. When the liquidation announcement was made, Dave Walls told the administrators he wanted to buy part of the company. Tom Irwin, an independent contractor who had been working for AI's US operations, happened to be visiting Portsmouth headquarters on the day the announcement was made. He immediately declared his interest. Within 24 hours, Dave Craig and Paul Bagshaw, the financial director, had joined the team. The four of them started working the phones. By the 29th of April 2005, 10 weeks after the shutdown, the company was reborn. Walls and Craig back in control. The people who designed the rifle once again building it. They won the Queen's Award for Export Achievement in 1998. They won it again in 2015. They currently have 92 employees and supply rifles to militaries in over 60 countries. In 2009, the US Special Operations Command put out a solicitation called the Precision Sniper Rifle Program, a contract to replace 3 different American sniper platforms with a single multi-caliber system. AI developed the AX series to compete. The AX was a departure from the AW's permanently bonded chassis, multi-caliber architecture, quick change barrel via a single hex key, convertible between .308, .300 Win Mag, and .338 Lapua in a matter of minutes. In 2013, the contract went to Remington's modular sniper rifle. Tom Irwin, AI's business director, was direct about it afterward. In an interview with Small Arms Defense Journal, he said, "I knew when you're up against Remington in the USA, it was always going to be difficult. We've got 10 people, including myself, and 4,000 square feet in the US. When you compare that to Remington's facilities, we're small fry." The Remington MSR subsequently suffered reliability and quality control issues and was retired early. SOCOM launched a follow-on program called the Advanced Sniper Rifle. AI submitted again with the AXSR. In 2019, the contract went to Barrett's MRAD Mark 22. The company that had beaten the world in 1985 had now lost 2 consecutive American contracts. They remain the primary sniper rifle of the British Army. They supply over 60 militaries worldwide. Their rifles are still hand-built in Portsmouth. But the big American contracts, the ones that would make them genuinely large, remain out of reach. So, 47 years after Dave Walls and Dave Craig started making replica Colt revolvers in their spare time, 40 years after 3 competitive shooters beat every major arms manufacturer in a British Army trial, 15 years after Craig Harrison used one of their rifles to make a shot that most people would call impossible, Accuracy International is still in Portsmouth. Still 92 people. Still hand-building precision rifles in a factory that started as a garden shed. The British Army's current sniper rifle is an AI product. The world record longest confirmed sniper kill was taken with an AI product. The most iconic sniper weapon in the most played competitive shooter in history, whatever Valve decided to call it, is modelled on an AI product. They've lost 2 major American procurement contracts. They've been through bankruptcy. They lost the man who had the vision to put them in front of the MOD in the first place. And they're still there. No place for second best. That's their actual company motto. Given the competition they've beaten, they might have a point.